So we've got another transition question. See the different transition options. As typical, we're going to read the first sentence before the underlined portion, then the sentence after the underlined portion. Do that first, assess the right relationship of ideas, and then we'll pick out what the right transition word will be. Before California's 1911 election to approve a proposition granting women the right to vote, activists across the state sold tea to promote the cause of suffrage. Okay, that's interesting. In San Francisco, the Women's Suffrage Party sold equality tea, nice name, at local fairs. In LA, activist Nancy Tuttle Craig, who ran one of California's largest grocery store firms, distributed Votes for Women tea. So these were different tea names, but they're both doing the same thing, selling tea. So is this going to be an example? I don't think so. I mean, it is an example, but there's another example before it. So it's not an example beforehand, because we would have said, for example, in San Francisco. We didn't say that, so I don't think that's going to be right. To conclude, in Los Angeles, well, we're definitely not concluding. That's not right. Similarly, these are two similar examples. We've seen this before, this structure on the transitions. You get two similar examples, and that's going to be it. Similarly, so in San Francisco, we did this tea, and in LA, similarly, we sold that tea. It's not an example, it's not a conclusion, and it's not even in other words, right? We're not trying to restate something more simply. They're similar examples of women selling tea to promote women's suffrage in California, I guess. Okay, transition question. You can see a quick vertical scan and the prompt. Let's read the question, the sentence before the underline, the sentence after, and assess the right relationship of ideas. In 1933, the 20th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified. The amendment mandates that presidential inaugurations be held on January 20th, approximately 10 weeks after the November election. This amendment requires newly elected U.S. senators and representatives to be sworn into their respective offices on January 3rd. So wait, the first part is about the presidential inauguration, okay? And the second sentence after the underline is about the U.S. Senate's inauguration and the date. These are kind of additive points, I would say. One is not a consequence of the other, so it's not an alternative. So instead, this amendment, it's not instead, it has nothing, the Senate inauguration has nothing to do with the presidential. For instance, it's not an example, specifically or in addition. So I said it was additive, that would suggest in addition, but let's read specifically, because that's kind of a different, specifically would be, well, that would again be, for example, focused. Specifically, this amendment requires, no, because I didn't say specifically the presidential inauguration is January 20th. Why would I then say specifically the senatorial inauguration is on January 3rd? No, that's not the right idea. It's in addition, two additive points. Okay, another transition question. Nothing terribly unusual about the transition words. We're going to read the sentence before the underlined portion, read the sentence after the underlined portion, and see what the right relationship of the idea is. The more diverse and wide-ranging an animal's behaviors, the larger and more energy demanding the animal's brain tends to be. Okay? Blank. From an evolutionary perspective, animals that perform only basic actions should allocate fewer resources to growing and maintaining brain tissue. The specialized subtypes of ants within colonies provide an opportunity to explore this hypothesis. Okay, so what's going on? So you say if an animal's going all over the place, it requires a lot of energy to do that, and that provides demands on the brain. Okay? More energy demands on the brain. And then evolutionary animals that perform only basic actions should allocate fewer resources to growing and maintaining brain tissue. So this is kind of the opposite idea. If you're not going all over the place, you're just doing basic actions, so that's not more demanding, then you would allocate few resources to growing and maintaining brain tissue. So actually, I think that's consistent, right? More energy, more activity, more wide-ranging, more demands on brain energy. Basic, not wide-ranging, less demand on brain energy and growth. So is this subsequently? No, it didn't occur. This is not a chronological issue here at all, or sequential. Besides, nevertheless, so if they're similar, it shouldn't be contrasting. Thus, is it cause-effect, or is it beside, alongside? So the more diverse and wide-ranging animals, the tends to be besides, from an evolutionary perspective, animals. So kind of besides. Besides this, I do that. So besides the fact that more demanding behavior requires more brain energy, is the fact that animals that perform simple ranging behavior, simple behaviors require less. I think that's besides. I think that's right. It's not a cause effect. The one does not cause the other. These are just two similar reinforcing ideas that go besides each other, I suspect. Okay, we've got a transition, questions, and we see this specifically a lot now. Specifically, that's focused on an example or something. So let's read the first sentence before the underlined and then after, and assess the right relationship of ideas. In his 1925 book, The Morphology of Landscape, U.S. geographer Carl Sauer challenged prevailing views about how natural landscapes influence human cultures. Okay, so what's this? He's challenging the prevailing views, how natural landscapes influence human cultures. Not sure how or what that view is, but he's challenging it. Okay. Sauer argued that instead of being shaped entirely by their natural surroundings, so I guess the prevailing view is that the natural landscapes influence on human cultures, that the human culture, instead of being shaped by its natural surroundings, so nature influences the human culture, cultures play an active role in their own development by virtue of their interactions with the environment. Okay, so what did Carl Sauer say? He said that people change their natural surroundings, not necessarily the natural surroundings influencing humans to adapt to that. So these are contrasting ideas. Do we already have a contrasting transition? Not really. Well, we don't really have one in our answer choices. So similarly, blah, 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 national influence, he challenged the prevailing view. Similarly argue that instead of being, no, that's not similar to anything. He's challenging the view. Finally, Sauer, no, at the very end, there's no reason for that. Therefore, Sauer argued, no, that's not it. Specifically, yeah, he made a specific argument, right? Specifically. So he challenged the prevailing views, which they didn't tell us, and now specifically, they're going to give us that detail, that, prevailing view. Instead of nature influencing man, man can actually influence nature. Kind of the idea. D is correct. Okay, another transition question. For example, conversely, in there, that's an unusual one. There, like pointing to over there. I don't think I've really seen that in a transition word question, but well, let's take a look. Well, as always, we're going to read the first sentence before the underline, the sentence after the underline, assess the relationship of ideas. So establishing UTC is no easy task. Each month, readings of a single second from atomic clocks around the world are taken and sent to the International Bureau of Weights and Measures in France. That International Bureau, meteorologists perform the meticulous work of assembling these minutely disparate readings into a globally shared time standard. So it's not easy. They send it to France. Probably there in France, they assess that result and create a global time standard. I think that's right. So in particular, let's see their options. In particular, meteorologists perform the meticulous work of assembling. Not really, because we just mentioned where they sent it. So there, and we're talking about the same place, so there, I think is more appropriate. For example, this really isn't an example, right? They just said they sent it to this organization, and the organization assembles that into global standard. So that's not an example, the second sentence. And it's definitely not contrasting. So there, A. Haven't seen there as a transition, but there you go. It's the right answer. Another transition question. Hence, we don't see that too often, but that's a cause and effect, like thus as a result. Let's read the sentence before the underline, the sentence after the underline, as we typically do, and assess the relationship between the ideas. Earth's auroras, colorful displays of light seen above the northern and southern poles, result, broadly speaking, from the sun's activity. The sun releases charged particles that are captured by Earth's magnetic field and channeled toward the poles. Okay, this is more detail. It says the aurora is caused by the sun's activities, and then it tells us how it's caused by the sun's activities. So that could be specific, not contrasting. It's not really a result. We wouldn't say it's caused by the sun's activity as a result of the sun. No, it's not a cause effect. And it's not similar. It's actually specifically. We're going from a broad statement to the details. So we're drilling down to the specifics. Again, this one appears a lot specifically on the new digital SAT transitions. Did not see it too much, at least that I recall, in the old paper transition questions, which were very similar, by the way. Specifically, that's the answer. Another transition. Next, we don't see that too often. I mean, clearly sequential. Hence, we don't see that too often, but we've seen it a couple times. It appears more, I think, now on the new digital SAT. It's just thus as a result, a cause effect. Okay, so we're going to read the first sentence before the underline, read the sentence after the underlined section, and assess the ideas or relationship between the two. So when in the 1800s, geologists first realized that much of Earth had once been covered by great sheets of ice, some theorized that the phenomenon was cyclical, occurring at regular intervals. Each ice age is so destructive, though, that it largely erases the geological evidence of its predecessor. No, not that. So basically what's happening, people thought ice ages are cyclical, they repeat over and over, but every ice age kind of just erases the ones before it. So geologists were unable to confirm the theory of cycle ice ages until the 60s. So this is going to be a result. Because the ice ages erased the previous ice ages, geologists could not confirm their theory. So hence, not moreover, it's not an additive point. In addition, no, not really additive, not contrasting, and it's not sequential. It's not that, each ice age is destructive. Next, geologists were unable to confirm. That's not the relationship at all. It's cause effect, A, hence. Okay, another transition. Earlier, we don't see earlier too often, but obviously sequential. Instead, we don't see that too much, but that's an alternative. Instead, despite, in spite of kind of thing, alternatively. Similarly, in particular, okay, that's more focused. That's comparison, how alike things are. All right, let's read the sentence before the underline, after the underlined. We start there pretty much always, identify the relationship between the ideas, and then use that to find which specific transition word or phrase is correct. Originally coined by economist Joan Robinson to refer to markets with multiple sellers of a product, but only one buyer, the term monopsony. So I've got many sellers, right? And there's only one guy here, that's my buyer. That's what's going on. That's a monopsony, okay? Can refer to markets where demand for labor is limited in a product. So it can refer to, so what would that be in this case? Not a buyer seller. Well, it would be, I guess, a buyer of labor, which would be a company, maybe a business, and the sellers of labor would be the people wanting to work. So, okay, in a product monopsony, the single buyer can force sellers to lower their prices, right? Because there's only one buyer and many people want to sell to him, so he's got choices. Okay. In a labor monopsony, employers can force workers to accept lower wages. It's the same idea, okay? Very same idea. One is just a seller buyer kind of in a market. The other is the seller of labor, that is the labor itself. The other is the buyer of labor, that's the business, okay? Or the employer, as it would state here. So similar ideas. So similarly, basically the same idea with two kind of applications. It's not earlier, it's not sequential, it's not instead, and it's not even in particular, right? It's just similar ideas. Okay, another transition, some basic transition words, nothing unusual here. And we're going to read the sentence before the underline, the sentence after, and assess the right idea between them, the right relationship of ideas between them. That will help us pick the right keyword or transition word. So, the chemical trimethylamine oxide not only gives fish their fishy smell, but also protects them from crushing hydrostatic pressure in deep waters. Okay, so smelly fish, the smelliness also helps the fish from getting crushed when they go down deep. So this chemical strengthens the bonds between water molecules in a fish's body. I guess that's how it protects them from getting crushed. Next, these water molecules maintain their linked structure at extreme depths, thus preventing pressure-related damage. So this is more detailed explanation of how and exactly how this chemical works. So what transition word indicates more detail? Nevertheless, these water molecules maintain their links. So let's just make sure it's not contrasting. It strengthens the bonds between the water molecules in the fish's body. Nevertheless, these water molecules maintain their link structure. No, it strengthens the bond, so of course they maintain their link structure. It's definitely not contrasting. As a result, these water molecules maintain their link structure. That's probably it, right? It strengthens the bonds of the water molecules. As a result, the molecules maintain their link structure at depth, thus preventing pressure-related damage. I think that's going to be it. It's not, however, not contrasting. In the second part, it's not an example. It's not, for instance, of, no, it's a result of the previous sentence.